Catalonia's independence movement, as well as the legal referendum on independence. I want to emphasize the word illegal because it was blocked by the Spanish Constitutional Court, but still held by the Catalonian government. Catalonian Independence. Spain takes charge of Catalan government. The Spanish government has stripped Catalonia of its autonomy and taken charge of its government. The measures came early on Saturday after the Catalan parliament voted to declare independence on Friday. An official state bulletin dismissed Catalan leaders and handed the control of Catalonia to Spain's deputy prime minister. Catalan leader Charles Puigdemont, and I think that's how you pronounce it, has called for democratic opposition to the takeover. He made the call in a TV address broadcast from an undisclosed location. Earlier, Spain's Interior Ministry took charge of Catalonia's police after firing senior Catalan police officials. On Friday, the Prime Minister announced the dissolution of the regional parliament and the removal of the Catalan leader and called snap local elections. Demonstrations for and against independence went on into the night. A large rally for the unity of Spain and the constitution is being held in Madrid. The crisis began when Catalan leaders held an independence referendum defying a ruling by the Constitutional Court, which had declared it illegal. The Catalan government said that of the 43% of potential voters took part, 90% were in favor of independence. The opposition, not others, the opposition, the pro-unity parties, which were close enough to 50% and not enough to block it in parliament, boycotted the vote after the court ruling because it was illegal. On Friday afternoon, the Catalonian regional parliament voted to declare independence from Spain. Soon after, the Spanish Senate granted the Prime Minister government the power to impose direct rule on Catalonia, which he did, and so on and so forth. Quite a few things to say. But one of the final things I want to look at when it comes to this article, many Catalans feel they pay more to Madrid than they get back, and there are historical grievances too, in particular Catalonia's treatment under the dictatorship of General Franco. But Catalans have been divided on a question of independence, and that's where I stop reading from this article. I'll provide a link if you're interested in its entirety. Here's what I've got to say on this. This was an illegal referendum. Doesn't matter how one feels about the ruling, it was a legal, binding ruling. It really wasn't even preventing them from having a referendum. It was a suspension of the decision. Not a permanent decision, a temporary decision to suspend the referendum while they decided whether or not they had the right to hold it. They didn't care. And this is a significant problem, by the way, across the Western world, because there are many people who say we want X and we do not care about the rule of law in getting X. And this is a particular problem for people within the European Union. I mean, let's ignore the fact that all modern democracies are based on the rule of law and just flat out ignoring it because you want X regardless of the consequences. In Europe, the problem is, you look at the divide between Western and Eastern Europe. You see countries like Poland threatening to purge their entire judiciary system and replace them with political appointments. You look at Romania, my country, where the government, the left-wing government, tried to decriminalize corruption. Then you look at Hungary, where Viktor Orban is ruling proudly in a country he calls an illiberal democracy, and other examples as well. So Europe cannot, the European Union, the leaders in Brussels cannot, and rightly so, I may not agree with a lot of the decisions they make, but on this issue they're perfectly right, they cannot support an independence movement based on an illegal referendum. It undermines the rule of law, it undermines their negotiating position with Britain, it undermines Britain as well when it comes to the issue of Scotland. So no country in Europe can support this. Italy can't, because obviously there's the secessionist movements in northern Italy. Britain cannot, France cannot, because of the issue of Brexit and because of the weakening position. So there is no support for Catalonia. And by the way, you know, if you want to have your independence and all that, fine. You know, this is not a question of whether or not it's acceptable for Catalonia to go independent or not. But there has to be rule of law. There has to be rule of law. And that means that, yes, you don't get everything that you want. Because within the confines of the law, there are ways Catalonia could gain its independence. That they chose to flat out ignore the law because it wasn't working in their favor doesn't really matter. And mind you, the way they held the referendum, even within the confines of the Catalonia parliament, they went against the rules of parliament to rush through the bill on the referendum in order to hold it. So this was illegitimate and illegal, and no country in Europe is going to support this for many political reasons. And there's a great deal of dishonesty on this issue. On the idea, say, for instance, Catalonia staying in the European Union. Really? Do people really think... It's also the same issue I have with the Scottish push for independence. Does anyone really believe that Scotland or Catalonia or whichever part of whichever country that wants to go independent, do they genuinely believe that Europe would just be like, yeah, we accept you, no conditions, no change? That's not how it would work. That's not how the system works. Europe is very punitive when it comes to these issues, and I just find it a bit ridiculous to want independence but still want to stay in as part of the European Union. Just my 2 cents on this. But you know, there are historical grievances when it comes to the issue of Catalonia. There's always been people that have never been in Catalonia that have wanted to go their own path. That's fine. Though I gotta say, I don't have a great deal of sympathy for people that want to go independent because, oh, we pay more to the rest of Spain than they give us. Yes, but there are benefits to being part of Spain that ultimately contribute to the prosperity of Catalonia. That's just one of my points. But mind you, one should ignore the fact that this current situation as it exists is in part because of the complete and utter failure of the government in Madrid. Now, certainly, the current situation exists because of Supreme Court ruling. They removed parts of the Catalonian constitution, and I think that the reaction to that was really exaggerated. But one of the big reasons why the current situation exists is because of the sheer ineptitude of the government in Madrid. Like many other governments across the European Union, they handled the economic crisis and its aftermath very, very poorly, and this is why we're currently looking at a significant political crisis, one of the biggest that Spain is facing in the century, and a fairly significant crisis for the European Union as a whole, because this does affect the European Union as a whole. When you've got secessionist movements in northern Italy, when you look at obviously what's happening in Scotland, you know, between Scotland and England, then there's also the question of Belgium, right, and other places as well. So there's quite a lot of tension, so the whole thing might explode. Mainly though in Western Europe, there's also the divide between Western Europe and Eastern Europe, which is increasing. Things are now looking up for Europe right now. This is one of the last things Europe needed to deal with right now. But what's my takeaway? What kind of solution is there with this? Well, I personally think that regardless of where one stands on the issue of independence, that the Spanish government was well within its rights to crack down on the Catalonian government. I mean, the opposition basically in Catalonia, mind you, on a local level, the opposition in Catalonia basically objected to the vote being held on the issue of independence. They boycotted it. They didn't show up to vote. At least most of them didn't show up to vote on the issue of independence. Vast majority of them didn't show up to vote because they felt it was illegal, improper, etc. And they're right. And this is why it is proper for the Catalonian parliament to be disbanded, for the government to be disbanded, for direct rule to be imposed. Just purely on the level of the fact that they completely violated the rule of law with what they did. But we cannot have, in a modern democracy, in a modern system of governments, we want X, we violate the rule of law because we want to get X. That's not going to be recognized, that's not acceptable, and it just creates more and more issues. Quite frankly, I think the worst thing that could come out of this is if people did accept such a gross violation of the rule of law, as it occurred in Catalonia. Outside of that, would it work potentially for them to go independent? Yeah, sure. Assuming the European Union would be willing to accept that, which they wouldn't. Assuming that even if they were, they wouldn't impose punitive, very harsh conditions on Catalonia. Because the European Union, the way the European Union works when it adds new members is that there's always some conditions that are imposed for the benefit of already existing members. Specific members, I might add, generally in Western Europe. At least that was the case when it came to when it came to Eastern Europe joining Western Europe or joining the European Union. So we'll see how all of this plays out. I don't think that this is gonna be gonna be very pretty. I think the chaos and instability of Europe will continue. But this is all I had to say for the moment on this issue. Costin here, signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like the video. Thank you all for watching, and stay tuned for more. And if you like my content, please do consider supporting me via PayPal or Patreon.